super, super exciting. This is our May event, but if you were following on our socials close enough, you'll notice we referenced April quite a bit. Uh-oh. Whoops. But here we are. My name is Mike. I am taking over for Lindsay this month. Unfortunately, she couldn't come this month, but yeah, we'll just see how this goes. It is being recorded, but hey, if it doesn't make it up on the website, then it is what it is. We'll just keep Traci's portion on there. As always, we start off with an icebreaker. I did go ahead and post this on our social media ahead of time, just to get the pulse out there. I like to post these for people that maybe can't attend but still want to be involved. We had one reply, and that was the Griswolds, which I thought is pretty creative, right?
Good.
Whether it's I meant to follow up on whether that was like the Christmas version or when they go on vacation or which vacation, Europe, who knows? But yeah. So icebreaker today. What fictional family would you most like to join?
The Incredibles.
Oh,
That's a good one.
that's good. That's good. Now, I mean, are you the dad? Or are you like, or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you can do everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Yeah. I mean, that baby's got every. It's got every power, and then people just take care of it. Yeah. That's a great answer. Yeah.
I don't know if this family, but I would be part of Pippi Longstocking's family.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Because she's a badass little kid. She can lift a horse. She's an endless supply of gold. No one tells her what to do. She's the boss. I mean, and everyone is her family.
There you go. Yeah.
Everyone is her family.
That's great. That's great. I have the Wild Thornberrys. For some reason, I jumped straight to like Nickelodeon kids shows. I don't know if you're familiar with the Wild Thornberrys.
Oh, yes.
They live on the savannah. Yeah. That just seems like a good way to grow up. I feel like those kids, they're in a good place. I don't know. They're doing what they want. They're like, I don't know. When you're that exposed to things, I feel like you get a good dose of life every day, you know? Who else? Who's fictional families?
So this one just popped in my brain. The family from The Wrinkle in Time. They have to like go back and save their dad.
Ooh.
That's good.
Guys, you just came up with that?
I was sitting here thinking about it for like 10 minutes. And I was like, 1984? No.
No, not
No.
anymore.
Already there.
Yeah, pass.
Who else? Let's get one more. Who's
Brady
got one?
Bunch.
Oh, yeah. Why not?
Yeah. All those are their siblings.
Oh, believe me, I got those in
Not very fictional, huh? Yeah, that's real.
They got a trampoline.
The trampoline. That's so good. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into it. So I already brought up our social media. If you aren't following us on social, please do. Also, we do ask that you create an account on CreativeMornings.com so you can keep up with our newsletter, but that's also how you RSVP for these events. If you didn't RSVP, don't worry. I'm not going to be like checking tickets or anything like that. We're just happy to have you all here. This is great. Our global sponsor, MailChimp. I'm supposed to read something about them, and I will in about 2 seconds. Well, thank you to MailChimp. They're our global sponsor. So Creative Mornings is a complete non-for-profit organization, and so we rely on our sponsors like MailChimp to keep us up and running. And so they're our global sponsor for marketing. And oh man, this is gonna take a minute to get used to.
It's all right, Mike, we're all in it together.
Yeah,
We're all in it.
we're all. Y'all are anyway. Let's be clear about that. So they are doing this thing called Second Act. So if you're considering career shift, first of all, go check out the collaboration station back in the back. It gives you the opportunity to, if you're looking for work or if you're open for work, you can have a post-it note back there, and people can find your contact information and get in touch with you. I know we have a couple back there already. But also, if you're considering a career shift, MailChimp has some inspiration for you. So this month, MailChimp is presenting Second Act, a show which follows 5 people who've shifted careers in pursuit of their passions. That's great. Hear the inspirational stories behind how they've chosen and navigated their journey. We're going to post this on our social media, so you'll be able to access it. Another great reason to follow us, but I'm sure it'll also show up in the newsletter. How many of you is this your first Creative Mornings? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great. Wow, thank y'all so much. How many of you were brought here or heard about this from a friend? Yeah, okay. So, actually, that's the number one way Creative Morning chapters grow, is by bringing friends. So, this month, we invite you to bring a friend, which a lot of you have done, which is great. Whether they've never heard of, I'm not going to read this part, sorry. But, I mean, it makes sense. Bring a friend, make a friend, right? I know for a fact people here have gone on to have, great coffee dates and all sorts of things. This is a great community to, everybody's open to meeting and collaborating. And so yeah, bring all the friends. So if you don't know, Creative Mornings is a global organization. I looked it up this morning. There are 23, including ours, 23 Creative Mornings events going on this morning all over the world. So from Barcelona to New York, you can check it. They both have Creative Mornings today, although in Barcelona, I guess it's probably either tomorrow or whatever. But all on today. It's a global organization, and with that, they have started doing field trips. So these are a really, really cool opportunity to interact with people that aren't in your community. And so they put on these events. I mean, there's multiple a day. It's kind of crazy, but it's people associated with Creative Morning chapters all over the world. So there's like workshops and stuff where you can learn how to write better or be a public speaker. But then there's also people just kind of like showing off their work. And so highly, highly recommend when you go and create your account, if you haven't already, checking out the field trips. They're virtual.
And they're free.
And they're free. Yeah, they're free. So really, really cool if you're looking for extra learning, or, as you mentioned earlier, a potential career shift. I'm sure probably in the next month there's going to be somebody talking about something you're interested in. So highly recommend checking those out. Last little bit here, we are, everybody associated with Creative Mornings here, the sponsor, the organizing committee are all volunteers. And we're actively looking for more volunteers. So if you're interested in getting involved, whether that be just coming here and help set it up, or help with social media, or help get our newsletter out, there's so many things that we need to do to keep this thing running. And so if you're interested in volunteering, you can reach out to Columbia at creativemornings.com, or just come find me or Sarah or Craig or Lauren or whoever, and we'll be happy to point you in the right direction. All right, so Creative Mornings Manifesto. So we read the manifesto for Creative Mornings at every event, just to kind of get a baseline, right? Get everybody on the same page. And so I'm not going. Normally I read it for those.
Such a great
It's your
job.
first event. I am not going to read it. So, but I would like a volunteer if anyone is interested in reading the manifesto this morning.
I'll read it.
Here you go.
Yeah, there we
I
go.
have to stand here to read. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections and learning from others, and hugs and high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is welcome.
Wow. Give it up. Great. Great. Thank you so much. All right. So, if this is your first Creative Mornings, every month there's a theme. This month's theme is acceptance. So, acceptance is weaving into your story what once caused you pain and still might to this day. You welcome that creature into your home, tend to its wounds, and feed it out of your hand. Acceptance is knowing that there's feral animal. Whoa, what? Acceptance is knowing that this feral animal lives side by side with your tender house cat of a heart, always. So every month we have a theme. That theme is brought by one of the chapters. So this one is actually developed by the Lexington chapter, right down the road. So they came up with the theme of acceptance, and then Robert Beatty illustrated the theme. All right. So I think we're ready. Sarah, would you mind introducing your speaker?
I would be honored to introduce Traci. If you want to pull up her presentation. Hi everyone, thanks again for coming. My name's Sarah. I'm also on the committee with these wonderful people. I handle some of the booking of the speakers, and I am happy to say that we are pretty full up for the rest of this year, which is great, but we should be getting our themes announced for 2024 fairly soon, and we'll be looking for new speakers. So I know that there are a ton of people in this community that I have never met that are doing wonderful things. So if anyone ever has suggestions for great speakers for us, we would love to hear it. Please just go ahead and email our Creative Mornings email. You can find that on our website. We love to get new speakers in here and just keep meeting new people in the community. So thank you all again. And with today, Mike already talked a little bit about our theme this morning, which is acceptance. Admittedly, Traci Wilson-Kleekamp has been on my kind of like list to try to secure her in here for a long time. I honestly think she could speak to plenty of the themes that we have in here just based on the variety of her experiences. She is truly a pillar of our community. I actually heard of Traci first through there was a bail fund fundraiser through Pizza Tree. I love pizza and I also like to help. I thought that was a really clever way, and I, of course, that got me interested in learning more about what the bail fund is. Admittedly, I had never even thought about that before, and that made me realize that there's a lot more for me to continuously learn as well and to be better in my community. So that's when I started following Traci and the group Race Matters Friends. I've been continuously learning a lot. Sometimes it's very intimidating and it's hard, right? Reading those things and having to kind of look inward and getting uncomfortable, but that's how we learn and how we grow. So with that, I'm very excited to bring Traci Wilson-Kleekamp up to talk to us this morning about acceptance. And we will be holding a couple minutes at the end for Q&A, but I think that we're going to kind of be easy breezy today. So if you have a question that comes up, feel free to raise your hand and we have to answer those. Yeah, probably. It might be Boston now. Just trying so that she can see her friends.
Oh.
And then the arrows now, Traci should be able to move back and forth. And then here's your microphone.
So I don't know, is my voice loud enough or do I need to use the
Microphone.
Yeah, I'll use it. I always complain when I go to the school board, use the microphone. My talk today is cultivating discomfort, living pedagogy of critical acceptance as resistance. I'm not gonna read my own bio, I know that's boring, but I will say that the work of Race Matters Friends is a lot of undoing, right? And that is being able to decode decode these various messages that we get about what is a just society or what's an unjust society. And there's some confusion right now in our society about what it means to be in a just society. And I'll just get quickly to it. We're fighting against fascism, right? We're fighting against people that believe that there's only one kind of social order and that we should all adhere to that particular kind of social order. And it's an old fight. It is tethered and tied to our founding as a nation, and we are struggling with it. So I started thinking about cultivating discomfort as a topic related to acceptance because I had several people that I know died in April, and two of my friends I know took their own lives. And I just one day I said I need to accept that at least for one person, I need to accept their decision. And I didn't call it, mental illness or anything like that. I believe that this person took their life because they were suffering from painful pain. And the trauma of being inflicted over and over again with hopelessness, and not for the lack of trying, but doing a lot of trying and being met with, you're invisible, you don't exist. And this is a really difficult thing to live with when you aren't included in part of the social order of having an identity that is considered acceptable, right? So for me, as a lot of things in my life, I have to learn to walk through it. I have to learn to get through the muddy stuff and get to the other side. It just seems endless, So I'm taking a lot of this thinking from a book by Juliana Singh. It's called Unthinking Mastery. It is a very egg-headed book. Like, it's not a book that you would be like, yeah, I want to sit down and read this. It's like, it's a post-structuralism book. It's got really big words. But the last chapter is called Cultivating Discomfort. And I think most people can get through it. I didn't do that. Sorry.
Sorry. I don't know what.
Just turn your sound on.
Yep.
And that's fun. So if anyone's interested, I have a PDF of the book and we can get that chapter. But I'm gonna just give you a little head start. I'm gonna go forward and then backwards, and this is kind of messy, this process that I have, because it's really my thinking process. It's not like this lovely final end product, but just kind of my thinking. So I have some things for us to pass around and look at. Whenever I do PowerPoints, my daughter says, Mom, you use too many slides and you put too much stuff on your slides. So I've limited my slides to 10, and hopefully I'll pass the test. And when I show her my slides later, she's gonna say it's still too much text on there. Okay, but the first one doesn't count because that's an image, and then there's the text over there. So I'm just counting a little differently. And so I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna go back and do a little bit of honoring using Pixie Light Horse. So, to feel uncomfortable is precisely to be affected by that which persists in the shaping of bodies and lives. Discomfort is hence not about assimilation or resistance, but about inhabiting norms differently. The inhabitance is generative or productive insofar as it does not end with the failure of norms to be secured, but with the possibilities of living that do not follow these norms through. It's not so much that discomfort becomes radically transformative by breaking away from norms completely, but rather that discomfort shows us how to abide differently within these norms. But discomfort is also a passage through which we are moved by a lack of ease with the available scripts for living and loving toward each other. Perhaps no less discomforting possibilities for collective life. It's just a lot to think about. And also because so much of our discomfort, political, intergenerational, cultural, sexual, is inherited, and thus often unconscious, its potential to become an effective site of political resistance and reinvention requires a degree of psychic tilling. So in the chapter Cultivating Discomfort, Juliana Singh uses Jamaica Kincaid's book, I think it's My Mother's Garden, to talk about using the gardening process as a place of discomfort and uprooting. And it's really, really a great chapter, you know, how to get your body used to living, you know, outside of norms, right? So we have this huge fight going on about a trans identity, right? So that's always been the case. People have always been living outside of the norms, but we demagogue it now because it's a way of demanding the kind of social control, right? So before I move on and talk about Chief Jones, I want to take a pause backwards for just a second. So my area of interest is critical family history, and if I have time tonight, I won't, when it's over, there's a little story I want to tell about a woman who was enslaved and what happened to her after slavery, and the role that critical acceptance played in her life. So I'll try not to linger too much on this, but I do want to read another thing, and this one is by Pixie Lighthorse. And I put a quote from her on the top. It says, "What generational traumas are trying to be resolved in this body? What job did the ancestors hire me for?" So as a critical family historian, I'm really interested in power dynamics in families and the way those stories are told, or the ways that they're erased, or what's left out. And so a lot of putting the picture together is taking many, many, many pieces and creating like an assemblage and trying to put them together and make sense of them. So I'll read some of this because it's a little bit long, but I'm happy to share it later. It's called Honoring Advocacy. Its author, poet, and spiritual teacher, Pixie Lighthorse, is an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. With her prayer, we ask the Divine to give us all that we need to advocate for others. To advocate for others. Help me to speak out for justice with a special desire fueled by a power greater than surface comforts and outdated systems. Let me be a troublemaker to champion those I love and care for, and for those I don't know intimately who need my help. Hire me to be a powerful voice for the change that heals, reconciles, forgives, and improves. Help me to create time and space to lend support where it is needed. Transmit to me the passion to be bothered by violations of another's rights to life, liberty, happiness, and their voice. Find me faithful in service, riding shotgun to heart-led movements, and leading the charge when it's up to me to do so. Remove my feelings of hopelessness and what I perceive to be the opposition. Align me with action and channel my energy for others. Bind me to the medicine of love. Let me affect the transformation that leads to needed change. Light the torch of revolution in my heart. Stand me upright on a foundation of faith while I take the next steps. Build my voice as an instrument for defending freedoms which provide equality. Keep my motivations clean. Grant me the tools to see near and far, and find me adjusting the lens often. Help me give a leg up to the underdog, to root for the one who doesn't stand a chance. Help me to accept being unliked or misunderstood, for positioning myself behind what I believe in. Orient me to inclusivity. Help me to stop putting individuals into dualistic opposition. Rather, focus me on repairing broken systems and my participation in them. Dissolve my tendencies for clicks, partisanship, judgment, righteousness, bandwagons, and the damning or idolizing of those I perceive to have more than me. Help me to do my part to claim the bells of freedom. When 10,000 are whispering, make me the one who is listening. Part of honoring advocacy, at least in Race Matters Friends, is you become very unpopular. So if you listen to the Eagle and any of those, crazy shows, they're always calling me a racist, and I did something, and I don't, I hear about it because people call and tell me. And I would say it's great PR for our organization. We must really be getting under their skin that this little tiny group is making them prattle on the radio all the time. And so our concern when we first started this organization was during the time of the unrest in Ferguson, and could we advocate for a different kind of policing? So at the time we thought, man, if we get community policing, we can have a police department that works with the citizens, we can build trust, and we can do something about these disparities. And little did we know that would be a really unpopular thing to do, a very hard thing to do. So at first we thought we were I'm not gonna say we're making progress, I think we thought they were listening, and maybe they probably were, but when they weren't doing anything and we saw that they were just performing, and we got to be critical, we accepted what they told us, but we were being critical, we were accepting, we didn't like it, we were unhappy. So I started to notice the way that the department and the city uses language to play us versus them. And you have to be very careful, right? It's very easy to read through an article or something and miss the way language is coded to pit people against each other, right? So one of the things that the chief said is, any police contact is the culmination of other things going wrong in someone else's life, Joan said. That can involve systemic issues with housing, education, medical care, and employment. All the things that are outside the control of the police. Now, this is some full nonsense, and I'm using very nice language because I have a problem with swearing, so I'm just gonna say full nonsense. That's probably as clean as I can get it. Anybody that knows anything about policing knows that police are part and parcel to our system of social control, particularly when it comes to property, right? Protecting private property, city-owned property, anything that keeps the order of things in play. That's who they protect first. This whole thing about protect and serve, that's also full nonsense. That only certain people are protected and served. So I took an issue with this because it's also coded, it's also saying that all these people of color who come into contact with the police, it's your fault. You did something in your life that makes you responsible for us beating your ass, all right? Or stopping you for no reason, right? Or pulling a gun on you, right? So I thought this was interesting. They beat up a white guy. They beat up a white guy. And then in the next sentence, they say, we didn't really do anything wrong. We didn't really do anything wrong. We were just doing our job. And then they say things like, we're human. We make mistakes, right? I'll have Renee comment on the human business and the fact that they didn't really hit him that hard. His face was just already tenderized because he had been pounded into the sidewalk already, so they didn't really hit him that hard, right? And because we have this new state law called SB 26, all police records are closed. So by getting the officers to resign, there's no internal affairs investigation, and internal affairs investigations are also closed to public. But SB 26 says police officers' records of an incident are closed. So if somebody files a complaint against them with something they did, it's closed. You can't get it. That is fascism, right? So I want to say a little bit about these little pieces that we're going to work on together here in a minute. Well, one person I like is Jasbir Puar. She theorizes about intersectionality and assemblage to critique intersectionality. She explains, Jennifer Nash explains that assemblage advocates for the conception of relationality and subjectivity that decenters identity and embraces affect, sensation, and motion. These are long-time tools of Black feminist practice. So you'll see my art is what I used to think with and to make with, and I have little stick people. That's some of that's my sketching and thinking with intersection and assemblage. There's tension when you have assemblage. It's not about sameness, right? It's about we have relationality, right? I'll just use an example, which I'll use here in a minute, is about people who are unsheltered, right? They have a lot in common with people who identify as trans. They have a lot in common with people who are poor or people who identify as of color, right? Are they the same? No, but they're being oppressed in different ways for their identities. And these things intersect, but they also rub up against each other, right? So that's how you can have someone who's queer but is racist, or someone who's trans and doesn't like, so what I'm saying? That there's no clean, these oppressions are always at work. So our challenge with acceptance, critical acceptance, is to undo. And undoing is very messy. It's very messy. And so, kind of out of order, but intersectionality, going back to my issue of homelessness, recently, the city cleared all the encampments of unsheltered people under the pretext that they had received a notice of violation from the Department of Natural Resources. Turns out that's a lie. Sorry, I mean, that's a strong word, but it's a lie, right? But what's important here is intersectionality. People think about, same and all that. It's really about raising the questions of cognitive authority, negotiated in the context of structural inequality and the intransigent asymmetries of power, right? So housing, access to mental health care, all of these social layers collide around homelessness, right? And access to housing, et cetera, et cetera. So, thinking about whose identity is erased, the politics of invisibility, and how the norms of credibility reinforce hegemony. So the city uses its power to use somebody else's power to say, we can kick you off, and they're really overriding the real thing that's going on is that the very vulnerable and marginalized people have been put out with their no alternative. And so they talk about the homeless camp as being property, right? Property that has to be cleared because there's trash on it, right? But we don't say that. We don't report it when the college students are trashing the campus, right? And making a mess. We don't report that's like good trash, right? But if you're unsheltered, you're like bad trash. You're disposable. You're like this object, right? So because our group, including Hold Como Accountable and Como for Progress, Race Matters Friends, we're always paying attention to when language manipulates a situation and how those language manipulations happens through our media, we were able to call them out on, hey, there was no notice of violation. So they had to retract what they said, and now they've revised their story with a clarification, only because we complained about it, which says a previous version of the story mischaracterized a warning to the city from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. But here's the problem. There was no warning. That is straight BS too. I'm trying not to swear. Trying not to swear. There was no warning. A citizen forwarded a complaint. They forwarded a complaint. And so the media is still misrepresenting the situation, right? Here's another tricky thing. This is from the cover of Como magazine. Police get a lot of help from their supporters to use their various positions of power and privilege through language, imagery, performance, and public speaking and statements in the media to recode actual with the virtual narratives of non-substance that perform a non-story. That sounds like gobbledygook, but this is a great example. There's this picture with Sergeant Hester and the two guys walking with him, and the editorial says, isn't this great? This is inclusion, blah, 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 aren't we wonderful? But there's no story about the protest. There's no names for those people. We don't know why they're there. So there was all this protest going on. This makes the front cover. But we don't deal with, so the erasure here is very deep. But it makes them feel good that we put the back of two black guys on the cover of the magazine, and it says Black Lives Matter. Doesn't that look like, la, 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 that's so wonderful? I'm trying not to swear. But, interestingly enough, around that same time, that same police officer went on David Lyle's show, and they were defending themselves as being human, right? And somebody called in and says, well, I think Derek Chauvin's gonna, he's gonna get off, no problem. And the police were gonna host this conversation on campus about how the prosecutor in Chicago, or Chauvin was, I don't remember, Michigan, you guys have to remind me, was gonna use the law against Derek Chauvin. I'm like, what kind of full conversation is that gonna be? So on the air, they were having this conversation, and he says, and so our conversation off the air was that these things happen in fractions of a second, right? And then the analogy I gave was, but first I want to say, like, I'm not defending these officers, okay? So what I'm talking about is humanity. Police officers are human beings. Human beings have a central nervous system and a brain that operates and fairly consistently throughout the human population. There's no difference, except for you're a cop and you have a gun, which is how bad that. So the analogy I gave is, if a dog runs out in front of you, how hard did you press the brake pedal?
9 minutes, I guess. That's how long it took him to get him.
If you watch football every now and then, he's talking about, what's his name, Tom Brady. He mistakenly throws a pass to a guy that's a 6 foot wearing a different colored uniform for the opposite team. You know, how does this happen? What was it, a purposeful thing? Or was it, some kind of miscalculation on his part? And this is the thing, I'll tell you, I love people. I'm not defending the office so much as I'm just saying, is as a community, this has to be a part, not the only part, it has to be a part of the conversation about these tragic and ugly events going on. So, football and a dog. You see what I'm saying? So, the issue is getting overcoded by these objects, right, to get you distracted from what's really going on, right? And they're a little bit, you got canceled. So what we do in Race Matters Friends a lot is we are walking in tension, right? And that is very difficult for a lot of people because we're taught you're gonna be nice, you're not gonna swear in public, you're not gonna get angry, even if I'm just speaking directly, oh, she's angry, she yelled. I didn't yell, I just told you that was some full nonsense. And I didn't, did I yell when I said full? Maybe I said it passionately, full nonsense, right? So people get upset with that. But discomfort, acceptance, as critical acceptance, is managing the discomfort of speaking, moving, and resisting dominant culture values, social rules of inclusion and exclusion, and disrupting the various ways language, particularly the media, are proxies for maintaining oppressive systems and outcomes. This is really like our everyday job, right? Is to decode the message that are sent to us. So I thought what I would do, all my slides, aren't I good? I thought what I would do is just talk for a little bit. I have a couple of activities. So I have one little story I'm gonna read, and then I'm gonna pass some things out. You can move around and stuff. So what I did was I took some articles from, hold on, I gotta put this in. I took an article from the New York Times. It's from the March 12th, 2023 issue. And I chose it because it talks about poverty as exploitation, right? Most people, when they think about poverty, they think lazy. They think a whole bunch of stuff that's false, right? And it's a big article, so I broke it down into lots of little pieces. And when I do that, I'm cutting up and creating an assemblage, because each one of those pieces, try to think of text as having as much ontology as you do. That this text, it has being and life, right? So if we take this pieces of the article, each one of those statements is a part of real material life that we need to accept, critically accept, and start thinking about. The other thing I took from was from this book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. And I just pulled things out that were relevant to the conversations that we are seeing every day in the media and all that, just to help us process and make sense of it. So I'm gonna, you guys can sit in twos and you can talk about them. You can just reach in and grab a handful and talk about them. But for me, it was the making. It was the laying them out on the table and cutting them up and thinking about them and how they go together. And so I saw a correlation between the exploitation of poverty and fascism. And the connection is, in fascism, they want you to be impoverished in the mind, right? Anti-intellectualism, right? Claiming the victim while you were in a position of power, reinforcing this narrative about hierarchy, right? And anti-intellectualism, all of a sudden it's wonderful to be done. And that's not a good way to put it, but to be uncritical, right? And if you're critical, people will actually try to make fun of you. And they're like, what happened? What happened? I mean, I am prone to saying, I think Fred Flintstone's smart. You know what I'm saying? That's how silly it's gotten. But it's important that we try to figure out a way to displace this notion of hierarchy that is defined by maleness and the ability to act unilaterally, which is white supremacy, and to exclude people as a practice. So there needs to be a different definition of being human that takes into account that we aren't the only beings involved. All of this stuff in here are all parts of us. They should have as much, the object should have as much being as, it would help us appreciate our climate and the animals and all that if we could decenter our focus on ourselves as human and make room for the other parts of the world that we totally rely on every single day, like our coffee cup, you know, just everything, you know. So I really learned this from watching my granddaughters explore the world, and I was thinking about how we take so much for granted. And there was this moment where I was walking Zara, and she stopped, and she was looking at this street sign, and then she got down on her knee. She just looked at it. She just looked at it. She just looked at it. And I thought, I really need to be paying attention. This is really a cool sign, you know, light, you know. Or watching her play with water and try to catch it, right? And so much of life is, you know, you can't catch everything, right? But it's that engagement with the stuff that's not human.
Putting rocks in her mouth.
And putting rocks. She's obsessed with rocks, yes. We would come home with lots of rocks. Lots of rocks, putting it in the mouth. And my neighbor's like, you know, the dog's peed on that rock. I'm like, it's okay. It's really, really okay. Yesterday, my middle granddaughter, Charlie, she was playing, and then she looked up and she saw a roly-poly running across the sidewalk. So she runs over and she gets her little toddler hand and she picks it up, and of course she puts it in her mouth. And she was already drooling, she's got a runny nose, and the next thing I know, the roly-poly escaped and was running down her chin. And so she gets the roly-poly, and then she brings it over to me, and in doing so, she drops it. So, you know, she's picking it up, and it's rolling up, and, you know, he passed away, because, you know, he just, that's a lot of squeezing for a little roly-poly. His little feet are kicking, and she's like, look. And so they make me appreciate those little things, you know. So now every time we go outside, we're like, look at the roly-polies, you know. So I thought we would kind of sit a little bit in groups, and we'll look at those articles. But I'm going to take a little break, because I've been talking a lot, so that you can sort of process and talk to your neighbor. And I'm going to pass around something that's fun. Hold on. I have to admit, I have this really weird habit that I started doing, and Lauren's laughing because it's a weird habit. Okay, so like I hoard the New York Times. Sunday edition only. They'll stack up, and I just go through them, and I'm just looking. It's my way of looking for hope, and so I like to see what people are writing to get us to think otherwise. And so that's really exciting. I'm like, you know, whenever I think the world is really jacked up, I'm like, okay, read the book review. That's the part. So I read the book review. The other thing that I read, I screwed up. Wait. Oh, I think it's next to you. Can you bring me that stack of? Let me see. I probably screwed up. Oh, here it is. See, I told you this was messy.
It's right, we love it. It might feel messy to you, but it doesn't feel like that.
Like, this is messy. Like all these bags and stuff. You can see I'm a hoarder, right? You can see that I'm a hoarder. One of my favorite things in the New York Times is the Modern Love section, and it has every week these tiny stories, right? They're really small. And I'm going to read one of them. It says, tiny love story. The message is the same. When I turned 13, my mother gave me a silver link bracelet. Together we added charms, tangible commemorations of events, trips, hobbies. My daughter didn't like the bracelets. She commemorated college with Emily Dickinson tattoo to my dismay. Others followed, inspired by movies we watched, Jimmy Stewart's camera from the rear window, and Scout's hand costume from To Kill a Mockingbird. Then cheers for the sewing talents of my mother, for whom she made. With the scissors, I finally got it. I jingled charms. She sports tattoos. We both wear love on our arms. These are really cool stories of acceptance. So I'm going to just pass some of these around. There's a couple there. Take a quick look and pass it around. And then I also look at the times for the ways that we tell stories differently. People are inhabiting the world differently. So one is a bar that's totally dedicated to women's sports, right on. And then another article about
Is that the one in Norton? Is there one in
it's in Portland.
Okay.
And then the other one is a partnership rooted in beauty, the ephemeral and eternal. It's a Sulawesi, a Korean skincare brand, teams up with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I'll pass these around on this side. This is a little story, and then these are the others. So while you're doing that, pass them around. I'm gonna pass out a couple other things so that you guys who don't have something aren't bored, right? Everyone's getting cool stuff to look at. This article is going to be part of what we will be talking about a little tiny bit. You have a head for fun, but organization is a struggle, so I'm going to start here. This is one of my favorites. This was a pull out in the Times. Since I was wrong. So all of these columnists write about the things that they were wrong about in their predictions, right? So that's kind of cool. So that's a little bigger piece. These are, I just bought this book. It's called The Sewing Girl's Tale. It's about sexual violence in the Revolutionary time. This is about the song, Oh Say Can You Sing? There's trauma and violence, love language. There's a new youth novel about textiles, road safe plants, new books. The children's books are becoming really great. A story about the exile of two lovers, and the characters have dogs and animals that speak and have their own minds. So that's a new book. And then there's this cool one about climate change, and I just like the image. Right? Oh. It's like that is good.
What now? Say that again.
It's about climate change, and it's like the image. Right?
Oh, yeah.
The image. Gina, great. We need some.
Yes.
Tracy?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? while
Yes.
We're all looking at this. So, over the years, and I'm pretty old, so there's been a lot of years, one of the things I've learned about acceptance and our all the preconceived notions that were fed, when we begin in life. I grew up in southwest Missouri in a little town with no black people in it. And there were no black people in it because it was a sundown town. And I didn't even know about sundown towns until like 5 years ago. But I found out about a lynching of a man in my town about 5 years ago. And, but I spent time in southwest Georgia 40 years ago with a large black population, and most of my days were spent within the black community. And there were definite lines about, what was black and what was white. And one of the things I learned was, that proximity was absolutely key to acceptance.
Yes.
Because without proximity, we all go to our houses, and none of us see people who don't look like us, so we're virtually none of us. Even in Columbia, Missouri, I've been told over and over, I have a Latino husband, he's Native American, indigenous. We have 2 daughters. They're somewhere between his very dark brown and straight black hair and me. So they're still brown. And I was told over and over, whenever people were definitely biased against one of those because she's bigger and she's browner and looked more indigenous. Not in Columbia, Missouri. We're so diverse. If you say that to me, I'm liable to do more than say something more. Something.
Yeah. Full nonsense, right?
Full nonsense, don't be what I say.
Yeah.
And we get to this because we have no idea who anyone is that doesn't look and sound like us. And I know it absolutely was crucial to my understanding and getting into other spaces. Those 4 years I spent in southwest Georgia every day. But I wouldn't have, if I had chosen that for my job at Habitat for Humanity, to be kind of a liaison between homeowners and the organization, because it was uncomfortable.
Right.
And I was the white girl for weeks and months. That I could hear people say, "Oh, the white girl's here," and I had to go through this idea of what that's like to not have a name other than being identified by your skin color.
By your skin color.
And what I finally realized, was eventually my Grace is here, and it was Eureka. I now have been accepted. But one of the crucial points to that was I also learned that binaries don't, you've already said it, you've said it several times, binaries don't work, but we are all, if we're white, we are brought up with binaries. Everything's good, bad, black, white. I am always, with Traci, blown away almost every day because of her ability to see beyond those binaries, to accept the crap from Chief Jones, and still be his friend who calls her up to ask her for advice when she ought to say, F off.
He's not calling me now anymore because I've been too critical.
So how do you suggest, because here we all sit, and I want you all to take real stock. What do you know that's different than you? I mean, as an intimate friend, as an intimate relation to you. Think about it. Because I bet most do not. And the thing is, I got thrown into a situation. My parents, however, brought me up, my mother specifically, to enjoy differences. She invited people into our home that nobody else would invite in. And that happened to be Black and Asian people who needed a place to be during holidays from SMS. And she worked other people into our lives. So I watched her, she was my example. When I was put in this position, I decided I'm gonna eat this up. I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna shut up and listen. I ask a lot of stupid questions. And I think about it now and I think, good Lord, why did Nama Ruth just pop me against the mouth for some of the dumb questions I asked? But she's patient and kind. How do people get helped without making it to become proximate, but not make this like, we also, white people, say, oh, this is my goal, I'm gonna go get proximate. I'm gonna start going and showing up, I don't know where. And how do you make it so it's, I mean, there's no way any of us are ever gonna get this if we are not involved with people who are vastly different in all of these areas of inequity.
My comment always is if we want to get rid of racism, it's gonna have to be white people that put it down.
Absolutely.
And so that means, getting the courage to face other white people, even in everyday situations, and hold them accountable for those binary logics that fly out of their mouths, right? It's called a deciphering practice, right? Today what we were doing is a little bit of a deciphering practice, right? It sets out to take the image, sound, signaling practices of film and television or a narrative story as the objects of a new mode of inquiry, right? To erase those traditional barriers between the natural sciences and the humanities that create narrowly constructed worlds, right? So we have to teach ourselves to do that so that we can regulate our behaviors and feelings and beliefs, right? That we're in touch with them. Otherwise we get disconnected from ourselds, right? And from other people. And we become alienated. So whether you get proximate, for me, what I'm showing you is, I could live in, I've lived many places where I'm one of the few Black people, but I have to find tools that bring the world to me, right? So to me, reading is one of those ways. I just use the New York Times as an example, but I'm also digging into the Times in a way to show that, even if I read this, okay, that's fine, but am I gonna get out and explore these ideas as well? How can I put them to work? Because I know lots of people who are the same color as me, who are also still caught in that world. So you can be proximate to people who are still driven by binary logics, and so part of the reason I don't watch a lot of TV is because that stuff gets in your head, and it's really hard to get rid of it, right? So I'm very selective about what I allow into my mind, right? Which makes me kind of an egghead because I'm always toting around books and stuff like that. Makes me look like a weirdo. We're gonna run out of time, and so my activity that I wanted to do, I need to make a decision based on what you say about time.
We got a couple of minutes.
Okay.
If you would, unless anyone has any dire questions that you want answered, we can go forward.
So I'm gonna do two things. So I'm gonna start on this side. And just pull a card, I'm gonna start on this side, and just pull a card out. So, you can even grab a handful and pass them back. So, all of these are from this one article in the New York Times about poverty. Right? It's all about poverty. And so, you can take a picture of it so that it stays with you, and I want you to use it as a way of getting proximate to the issue, right? Take a picture of it and use it this week to think about acceptance and thinking about an issue that you want to know more about, because honestly, poverty covers poverty is exploitation, right? It is a social concern. We made poverty, right? But it's done through divide and conquer. That's the only way that it can be maintained. And so it means if we want to do something about poverty, and that's what he's saying in the article, is that, we could do something about it, right? We could do something about it. But it really does involve dismantling those narratives that we have about who is poor and why they're poor. And I'm sorry, there's a really great definition in this article about poverty. Oops, I just walked in front of the monitor. That I think is important given the kinds of conversations that we have, today, and that's not. It's really hard to get people out of these, us versus them conversations. Let's see. It says, as a theory of poverty, exploitation elicits a muddled response, causing us to think, of course, but no, in the same instant. The word carries a moral charge, but social scientists have a very cool-headed way to measure exploitation. When we are underpaid relative to the power of what we produce, we experience labor exploitation. When we are overcharged relative to the value of something we purchase, we experience consumer exploitation. For example, if a family paid $1,000 a month to rent an apartment with a market value of $20,000, that family would experience a higher level of renter exploitation than a family who paid the same amount for an apartment with a market valuation of $100,000. When we don't own property, we can't access credit. We become dependent on people who do and can, which in turn invites exploitation. Because a bad deal for you is a good deal for me. Our vulnerability to exploitation grows as our liberty shrinks. Because undocumented workers are not protected by labor laws, more than a third are paid below minimum wage, and nearly 85% are not paid overtime. Many of us who are U.S. citizens who cross the borders through official checkpoints would not work for these wages. We don't have to. If they migrate here as adults, those undocumented workers choose the terms of their arrangement. But just because desperate people accept and even seek out exploitative conditions doesn't make those conditions any less exploitive. Sometimes exploitation is simply the best bad option. In closing, the article notes that living our daily lives in ways that express solidarity with the poor can mean we pay more. Anti-exploitative investing could dampen our stock portfolios. By acknowledging those costs, we acknowledge our complicity. Unwinding ourselves from our neighbor's deprivation and refusing to live as enemies of the poor will require us to pay a price. It's the price of our restored humanity and renewed country. So really, acceptance is, we have these problems, they're full of problems, but we're not gonna have the kind of, democracy or the kind of community that we desire that's equitable if we don't pay attention to the ways that we are being manipulated by our own institutions. I only use the examples of the police because they have a lot of power, right? There's a state law that says the citizens cannot oversee the police department, right? You cannot give if an officer, like those guys, we can't get their records, right? We can't get their body cam. They have basically been granted immunity from, any oversight. And so they call that law a police bill of rights, right? But the citizens got nothing out of it. So, and our whole council voted for it, right? And our city attorney is upholding that logic. So if we're not paying attention because we accept that this is how police are, or we accept this is how the university acts, or we accept these things, You know, when I get up and complain about it, it's like, this is another black lady, she's, you know, complaining. But if white people, because of the way the social orders, when they complain, things happen.
And we can only accept that's the way it is because of the skin color of us and our children. Because we aren't affected by it. And that can't go on, or it will go on. What is happening.
It's going on in such a way now that it is creating major complications. So just think about it. All of those folks that were out on those sites were kicked off, and there's no plan for them. And now we're finding out that there was a list of sites that they considered for you know, putting unsheltered people, including the city dump, right? And then now another record just came out that they discussed pre-council, right? That's another cheating thing. They have policy conversations, and then they make decisions on the conversations that they have before council, but they don't bring that council, put that decision, that conversation, and put it on the agenda, so the public knows what's going on. So you have to sort of read between the lines of what they're doing to follow the policy. So anyway, there is a whole presentation on potential sites for, but they haven't, the document's not linked online. So if you went to the work session from the public, which isn't videotaped, you would have heard it. But if you didn't, you wouldn't know, right? So I'm gonna stop there because I always over plan. But as a commentary on today, I just wanted to show you because I never know if the projector thing's gonna work. I made handmade slides. So what I did was I took an old calendar and I put my text on there to think about fascism and poverty. There's nothing slick about it. I'm not like some super wonderful artist. No, that's not it. It's just a way to think with text. It's just a way to embody and think about the text differently than you would normally. And just to focus on the language, right? Just to focus on the language. You guys can put them in. Feel free to take a picture of them and so that you can use them. And questions. This is what I call messy, because it's not like, the super, snazzy, whatever. I did want to show you that this is my image of cultivating discomfort. And this was on the opening slide, right? And I was really thinking a lot in this about so many uncomfortable things that we have to face that has been bred by the system of divide and conquer. And it's a lot, and if we don't each do our part daily to say, okay, I accept that this is how this is, rather than, hey, if everybody does a little bit, it makes it a lot better. So,
Renee, don't you have a way that people could, I'm thinking of bail fund. Can you need volunteers for bail fund? Renee's the current president of Race Matters. Yes.
So, I was going to say something about the bail fund, and that is, it's only as effective as the political advocacy that we do alongside of the direct action. So if we're not actively disrupting the cash bail system politically, we are complicit in maintaining that system. So it's great to give money to the bail fund, but at the same time, we need people to do that, word advocacy, showing up to the meetings, pushing their, elected
Showing up to
leaders.
court.
Right.
Advocating for the folks in the.
I had one closing thing and I'll be totally done. Because I have put this. This is from a book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And I think this is a great closing story. It's very short about acceptance. And it's called, the title is Embedo, a momentary trance of emotional clarity. Sometimes when you're alone and everything is quiet, you feel a certain placeless intensity that drifts like a fog. It's subtle at first, lingering somewhere between fidgety boredom and accidental meditation. Maybe you're sitting up in bed on a dark morning before the day begins, staring blankly on a spot on the wall, thinking about life. Or you've arrived somewhere a few minutes early to pick someone up, and you turn off the car and you find yourself alone with your thoughts. You take a breath and look around at the still life of the parking lot, a few shrubs swaying in the wind, the rhythmic tinking of the cool engine, the key still swinging in the ignition, you begin to get a sense that something's happening. As when you notice a movie pushing into a close-up but can't figure out what it is you're supposed to be taking from it. Details that usually strike you as banal now seem utterly alien. The stitching on your shoes, the tendons moving inside your wrist, the saplings reaching. How delicate and fleeting all seems, everything struggling just to exist. You feel a kind of melancholic trance sweeping over you, a rush of clarity as if you're shaking yourself out of a dream. You're here, you're alive, you're in it. You look all around at all the people who happen to share this corner of the world and imagine where they came from, marveling that all their paths managed to cross at this particular point in time. You think back to the series of events that brought you here, your choices and your mistakes and your achievements such as they are. And all the twists and turns over the years, it wasn't what you thought it would be, and yet you still can look back at all the things you lost and the opportunities that came and went, and feel a pang of gratitude that it happened at all. And now you're here, feeling a kind of joyful grief for your life and all its blessings and mysteries and changes and chances. You look around with a new sense of gratitude, taking in the complexity of things. Raindrops skittering down a window, tall trees leaning in the wind, clouds of cream swirling in your coffee. Everything falls quiet, and the words start to lose their meaning. It all seems to mix together until you can't tell the difference between the ordinary and the epic. And you remember that you too are a guest on this earth. Your life is not just a quest or an opportunity or a story to tell. It's just an experience to be lived for its own sake. It doesn't have to mean anything other than what it is. A single moment can still stand on its own, a morsel of existence. But after a minute or two, you'll feel your hand reaching for your phone or the car radio, eager to drown out your thoughts with distractions. Perhaps there's a part of you that's instinctively wary of lingering too long in any one moment. We can breathe in this world and hold on to it as long as we can, but we can't just stop there. We have to keep moving, digging around for some deeper meaning, hoping to find an escape hatch between one experience and the next, so we never feel stuck inside one little moment, one little life.
Thank you so much. Follow Race Matters Friends, connect with Traci if you want to learn how you can help for the group. They have tons of stuff, updates on their page all the time. They're constantly posting things to learn about. We'll have this video uploaded to our website, probably maybe in a week or so, give or take. But tell your friends about this wonderful event. Tell your friends to come next time. We'll announce that speaker in a couple of weeks. But ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we're good. Thanks everybody for coming out.